The dispatcher's voice cracked twice before she got the words out. A livestock trailer had gone over on the county highway, and there were more horses inside than anyone could count from the road. It was 4 in the morning. The temperature had dropped into the teens overnight, and the asphalt outside the small town of Cutbank had turned to glass sometime after midnight. By the time the first patrol car arrived, the rig was lying on its side in the borrow ditch, steam rising off the undercarriage, and from the shoulder of the road it looked like nothing could have survived what had happened to that trailer. 60 horses had been loaded onto it the evening before, headed for a livestock auction 3 states away, and every person standing at that ditch in the dark believed they were about to spend the morning putting down animals rather than saving them. Walt Hensley heard about it over the scanner in his truck. He was 71 years old, had hauled horses across half the country in his working life, and had not planned on being anywhere near that stretch of road that morning. But something in the way the deputy's voice shook made him turn the truck around. He had spent 40 years around horses in trouble, and he knew that the difference between a horse that lives through a wreck and a horse that does not usually comes down to what the humans standing around it decide to do in the first 10 minutes. When Walt pulled up, the scene matched what the dispatcher had described, and then some. The trailer lay on its side across the ditch. One wall caved inward, and through the gaps in the metal you could see horses down, stacked against each other, not moving. A young firefighter was already reaching for a set of bolt cutters, ready to peel the roof back and get the horses out into the open air as fast as possible, because that is what instinct tells you to do when you see animals trapped and still. 2 more responders were arguing about which door to force first. Everyone on that stretch of road that morning was moving fast, and every one of them was about to make the wreck worse. Walt got out of his truck, walked to the edge of the ditch, and did not go any closer. He stood there for almost a full minute, just watching, while the fire crew waited on him to say something useful. What he was looking at was not 60 dead horses. It was 60 horses that had gone still, because stillness, for a horse in that kind of terror, is not surrender. It is a last defense. When a horse has struggled against something it cannot win against, its body eventually shuts the struggle down and drops into a kind of suspended stillness, conserving what strength is left, waiting. Most people who have never worked around horses read that stillness as death or as an animal too far gone to matter. Walt had seen it before, more than once, and he knew it for what it actually was. An animal that was still very much alive and would fight again the moment somebody gave it a reason to. He told the fire captain to hold off on the bolt cutters. That request did not go over well. There were 60 animals in that trailer, daylight was still 2 hours off, and the temperature was still falling. The captain wanted the roof open and the horses out where paramedics and a vet could reach them. Walt did not argue the point loudly. He asked for 5 minutes, and he asked that nobody bang on the trailer walls or shout while he used them. Reluctantly, the captain gave him the 5 minutes. What Walt did next was almost nothing to look at from the road. He knelt by a gap in the buckled siding, close enough to be heard but far enough back that no hoof could reach him, and he started talking low, the same even, unhurried tone he had used on spooked colts his whole life. He was not trying to calm 60 horses at once. He was trying to find the one horse closest to the opening who was calm enough to respond, because in a trailer wreck, the herd tends to follow whichever horse moves first. Get the right horse moving in the right direction, and the rest often follow. Get the wrong horse moving, panicked and thrashing, and you can lose the whole load in a matter of seconds, horses trampling each other in a space with nowhere to go. It took almost 4 of his 5 minutes before one horse near the gap lifted its head. Not a scramble, not a lunge, just a slow raising of the head toward the sound of Walt's voice. That was the sign he had been waiting for. He asked the captain to cut a second opening, not tear the roof off, just wide enough for one horse to be led out calmly, hood and lead rope ready. No shouting, no sudden light in anyone's eyes. The first horse came out on its feet, shaking, exhausted, but upright and moving under its own power. The second one followed almost the same way 4 minutes later. Word had gone around the response team by then that the old man standing at the edge of the ditch seemed to know something the rest of them did not, and the tone at the scene shifted. Instead of trying to force the trailer open all at once, the crew began working the way Walt was working. One opening, one horse, calm voices, no rushing hands. A large animal veterinarian arrived not long after sunrise and confirmed what Walt had suspected from the start. Most of the horses that had appeared motionless in the first hour were not critically injured. They were horses whose bodies had simply gone into that same defensive stillness, and every one of them that was pulled calmly rather than dragged in a panic had a dramatically better chance of walking away without a broken leg or a torn ligament from thrashing against metal in the dark. By mid-morning, all 60 horses were out of that trailer. A handful needed stitches. A few had strained tendons that would keep them out of work for weeks. Not one had to be put down. The responders who had arrived that morning expecting the worst kept saying the same thing to each other as the sun came up over the ditch. They had never seen anything like it, and they had never seen a scene turn around that fast because one man refused to do the obvious thing. What Walt did that morning was not luck. And it was not some rare gift only he possessed. It was the same lesson that specialists who train fire departments and veterinarians in large animal rescue have been trying to teach for years. A trapped horse is almost always safer staying inside a wrecked trailer, calm, than it is being torn out of one in a panic. The instinct to rip the structure open and get the animal into the light as fast as possible is completely understandable. And it is very often exactly the wrong move. Horses have survived catastrophic trailer wrecks by staying inside the wreckage long enough for a slow, quiet extraction, and they have been badly hurt, sometimes fatally, by well-meaning rescuers who moved too fast. The difference between the two outcomes usually comes down to a handful of quiet decisions made in the very first minutes, long before help with more equipment even arrives. Walt did not stick around for credit. By the time a local reporter tracked him down 2 days later at his place outside of town, he waved off most of the questions and said the same thing he had told the fire captain at the ditch. He said he did not do anything special. He said he just waited long enough to see what was actually true instead of what looked true, and that most emergencies get worse not because people do not care, but because people move before they understand what they are looking at. That morning outside Cut Bank did not make the national news. It circulated instead the way these stories usually do, through the people who were there, through a volunteer firefighter who could not stop telling the story to anyone who would listen, through a veterinarian who now uses it as a teaching example when she trains new large animal responders. 60 horses went into that ditch in the dark, and 60 horses walked out of it, and the only thing that changed the outcome was one old rancher who had learned, over a lifetime, the difference between an animal that has given up and an animal that is simply waiting to be given a reason to try again. If a story like this is the kind of thing that gets you invested, tell me in the comments what you would have done standing at the edge of that ditch in the dark, and stick around because there are more stories like Walt's still to come. If you have not subscribed yet, now is a good time so you do not miss the next one.